Last time we chat about how we define ourselves, the labels that we attribute to ourselves, whilst recognizing that every human is unfinished and continuously changing. Today, I'm wondering if there's anything essential and indivisible lurking in the heart of who I am that makes me, me. And to do so, I'll be taking a dip in the ocean. I once asked my Gran a question about teleportation. I asked her to imagine a hypothetical machine that could take each of a person's atoms apart, read all of the atomic information, concerning motion and energy, etc., and then send these atoms along a cable for reassembly. On the far side of the cable would stand another machine, or telepod. Telepod 2 takes all the atoms sent to it by Telepod 1 and uses them to reconstruct the teleported person. Each atom would be arranged exactly as it had been before, piece by piece, each with the same motion and energy. The resulting person would look the same, behave the same, and even have the same thoughts and memories as the original. My question was this: is the person who emerges from Telepod 2 the same person who entered Telepod 1? My Gran said yes, though I may be paraphrasing. If the person who emerges has the same personality, emotions, skills and memories as before, then they are the same person. For that's what a person is, in her understanding. A unique, immutable collection of mental and physical attributes. These characteristics are what makes us individuals. They are what makes us people. So next, I asked her to imagine the same experiment, but this time it's not the atoms that are sent between telepods 1 and 2, just the atomic information. In this version of teleportation, telepod 1 only reads the information encoded in the teleportee's constituent atoms without needing to take them apart. Telepod 2 receives that information and transfers the properties to a fresh batch of blank atoms. Or something. Then I asked my question again. Is the person who emerges from Telepod 2 this time the same person who enters and still stands inside Telepod 1? This time my Gran said no. Or some words to that effect. So I felt compelled to clarify. But the person leaving Telepod 2 has the same intimate thoughts, emotional responses, autobiographical memories, and every physical characteristic of the person in Telepod 1, right down to the finest atomic detail. It makes no sense that the original should have to be destroyed for a teleportation to be considered successful. Even so, my Gran insisted that in this second version of events, all Telepod 2 has made was a copy, even though she admitted the final product was exactly the same as in the first experiment. Only the original person entering the telepod was real, authentic, and sacred to her. The recreated person was a fake, despite how genuine their memories and emotions may seem. The original, therefore, had to be sacrificed, or it wasn't really teleportation. I feel that these common intuitions that people hold when discussing things relating to identity may be a result of what's called essentialism, or essentialist thinking. This is the idea that objects as we perceive them have some metaphysical essence. A tree, for example, is different to a table. Each of them possess their own discrete character, one with branches, one with legs. Observations like, "But the table was once a tree," or but one tree can be made into many tables, don't seem to matter. We're inclined to think this way, partly thanks to the ancient philosophers like Plato and his theory of forms, but also because a human lifespan occupies such a small slice of historical time. We rarely witness the full transition from seed to tree to table. Similarly, our common sense notion of what it is to be human needn't incorporate the full evolutionary transition from ape to man and beyond. Timelines aside, it's just so handy for us to imagine things, people, species, languages, furniture, as immutable concepts. Our definitions wouldn't be half as practical if they acknowledged the continuous spectrum of intermediates which exist, or have existed, all over the world. We have evolved to think and talk this way, so why would we doubt the reality of appearances? Essentialism is the confusion behind the supposed chicken and egg paradox. Our everyday notion of what it is to be a chicken doesn't need to encompass the historical reality of all its egg-laying avian and reptilian ancestors. The concept is only useful if we ignore them altogether. Obviously, every hatchling ever born was part of the same species as its parents. But that doesn't mean that offspring are unchanging. If you realize that what we call a chicken only exists as a convenient semantic label, a snapshot in the smooth continuum of life as it appears today, then the paradox disappears. From the idealized Platonic forms of ancient philosophy, we get the ingrained intuition of chickenness, humanness, and flyness. There's no solid grounding for these terms in reality, just as there's no hard distinction between where red ends and where orange begins in the spectrum of light. There's no definite moment when a baby becomes a child, or a child becomes an adult, though we use those words because it's helpful for us to make such distinctions. This is fine, as long as we realize that these distinctions are arbitrary, emerging for descriptive convenience, not some deeper objective reality. And we must be especially skeptical of labeling infinitely graded, yet politically sensitive attributes like mental health, ethnicity, and gender. What has this got to do with teleportation? My interest in science fiction, like David Cronenberg's The Fly, doesn't just extend to torturing beloved elderly relatives with conceptual semantics. No. Many movies continue to blow people's minds by exposing their previously unchecked essentialist thinking. The magic really was within you all along. In The Fly, through a freak teleportation accident, the mind and body of scientist Seth Brundle become a proving ground for distinct human and fly essences. Luckily, we don't need fantasy telepods nor vast evolutionary timescales to appreciate how entertainingly nonsensical this is. There are literally billions of creatures living all around us in the world right now whose lives directly contradict our common sense understanding of birth, growth, and reproduction. The chance linearity of our mammalian life cycle gave rise to the oh-so-human notion of individuality. Biological reality, as I hope to show you, is far less tidy and more interesting. The metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly, while completely fascinating, is existentially easy. After all, the original is destroyed. From egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly, the life cycle is reassuringly linear, and the individual's life, whatever that means, is at all times constrained to one body. But what if, say, a butterfly and a caterpillar emerged from the chrysalis at the same time? To which body would we imbue the insect's singular personal identity? Enter Luidia. Luidia is a young starfish. before you start imagining Luidia as a colourful, seafloor-dwelling animal with a five-fold radial symmetry, consider that starfish too must metamorphose from larvae before reaching that familiar adult form. From the moment she hatched, Luidia has been passively drifting on ocean currents, feeding on algae. She looks a little like a translucent sea anemone attached by a thin stalk to a pair of gently flapping wings. Unlike her parents, she has a definite head end and a long, thin, rather than round and flat, body plan. As she floats about promoting her admirably easygoing vegan lifestyle, a strange new organ begins growing inside of her. She isn't pregnant. As a larva, she has no reproductive parts. What's growing is as much a part of her as your liver is a part of you. Yet this growth is adult Luidia. Eventually, after it has developed and matured, adult Luidia will emerge from the body of her larva and settle permanently on the sea floor. Here she'll pursue an independent existence, hunting other starfish for food and spawning eggs for fertilization when the mood is right. Amazingly, once that adult starfish has broken free, young Luidia lives on, surfing the currents, relieved of all future obligations and responsibilities. So my question is, are larvae and adult Luidia the same starfish? By contrast, amphibian metamorphosis poses little threat to our human concept of individuality. From spawn to tadpole to adult frog, the individual is conserved through a linear progression. But what if tadpole and frog developed in tandem, within the same body at the same time? Let me introduce Siona, a sea squirt. Adult sea squirts are cruelly teased by other marine creatures, accused of being plants on account of their superficial lack of animal anatomy. Siona consoles herself with the knowledge that she too once possessed a head, a tail, even eyes. Sea squirt larvae actually look very much like tadpoles. Today, Siona resembles a miniature fleshy teapot with teeth. She sits, permanently fixed to a rock, quietly pumping seawater in beneath her lid and out again through her spout. However, reaching this tranquil adult stage must have been traumatic, to say the least. Unlike Luidia, Siona's younger self had to be systematically deconstructed. Inside the fertilized egg of a fully mature sea squirt, a dual life is forged. While larvae gradually take on that classic tadpole-like form, adult sea squirts shove their way into the world from between their own juvenile tissues. Once hatched, each layer of this living Russian doll develops in total disregard of the larger structure around it. All the larva's internal features are pushed aside, with the adult sea squirt growing its own separate heart, brain, and nervous system. Some time ago, as a rather conflicted free-swimming tadpole, Siona abandoned the open ocean for a sedentary life on the sea floor. After a little prospecting, Siona glued her head to a rock and gave up her immaturity for good. Her tail was dismantled from the inside out, skin separated from the internal organs, and the fins were jettisoned to the water currents. Even her tadpole brain was consumed. Siona exited her old life much the same way that Brundlefly ultimately exited Seth Brundle. Once all her remaining youthful components had been digested or recycled, Siona appeared as we see her today, peacefully filtering food particles through that gently pulsating teapot lid. Perhaps it's best that she exists as an amorphous blob without a face, as any expression would likely be one frozen in horror. But my question is this: Did anyone die during that process? There is one last twist to consider. Once Luidia and Siona have reached adulthood and created a new generation of fertilized eggs, their apparent individualism need not go unchallenged. Both starfish and sea squirts are capable of reproduction by lateral fission. In Luidia's case, this means that she can shed her adult arms, with each amputated appendage capable of growing into a fully formed adult, each with a legitimate claim to be Luidia. Siona has a different trick. She can bud off to form an entire colony of clones that cover her rock's surface. A bump on her skin can grow into a full-sized adult teapot before breaking off to live an independent life, adding loops to loops on her full ghastly life cycle. It is hard to overemphasize the philosophical implications of these true stories. Regardless of how teleportation might work, the basis for assigning an identity to any individual's life has to be reimagined when we stop to appreciate the full diversity of alternatives. Clonal reproduction and varying degrees of metamorphosis are in fact normal features of most species on Earth, not just the curious exceptions. A vertebrate's freakishly linear life cycle appears to be the real quirk of nature here. In fact, our own distant animal ancestors would have variously cloned themselves and passed through numerous stages of metamorphosis as part of their regular developmental programs. It's from these life forms that we have descended. Just because we happen to have abandoned such processes doesn't mean our current way is the right way, or even the normal way. And certainly doesn't mean that our persistent essentialist way of cataloguing the world has any grounding beyond an arbitrary descriptive convenience. Thanks for listening and sharing these podcasts about. I hope people enjoy thinking about these things as much as I do, and as long as I feel that's the case, I'll keep recording them. So, till next time.